You're listening to The Women in the Arena. I'm your host, Paige Rene, former collegiate athlete turned leadership entrepreneur for women just like you. Each week, I'm bringing you a new person or message to help you expand and elevate into the woman you know you're meant to be. Now, let's step into the arena. Hey you guys, welcome back inside the Women in the Arena. It's been a minute since I've done a solo episode, but I have a lot of things to share with you. And specifically, we're going to talk about 7 different pivots that I've made. And I've made them in business, but I was also working a full-time job. And so I hope that you can interject yourself in my story so that it can help you along your journey. Because a lot of times I felt stuck and I wasn't sure what direction to move in. And so I felt pivots was going to be a really great opportunity to share with you some of the transitions I've made. Now, with these 7 pivots, I'm going to share why I came to the decision that I needed to move in a different direction, and I'm going to share how I did it. So without further ado, let's go ahead and jump in. First one was back in 2014. At the time, I was selling apartments in Wilmington, North Carolina for about a year and a half. And I got really good at that job and I did well selling, but I really missed that what I could describe was a fire burn in my belly. And I really wanted to be connected to my purpose in my career. And while I enjoyed my job and I did really good at it, I just knew that wasn't where I wanted to be long term, but I didn't know what that next answer was. And so the why for me in this transition from that job in leasing to what would be an athletics position was I missed that fire burn in my belly. Where can I find that? And the how was that I started reaching out to college coaches. The only thing that I knew created that fire burn was when I was competing in athletics. And so I had just graduated in 2013. This was 2014. And so this was a year and a half later. And I really missed that passion for my work. And so I started praying about it. I started talking to college coaches. And eventually my head coach called me and said, hey, there's a position at Arkansas to be a director of operations. And so I Googled, where is Arkansas and what does the director of operations do? But then I decided, well, I can do anything for a year and maybe I want to be an athletic director. I knew I didn't want to be a softball coach, so director of operations made sense for me. But that was my first real pivot. I had a job and I said, okay, I've been doing this for a little bit. What's next? Which brings me to pivot number 2. So in 2017, I had been working in that job for a little over 2 years and I really enjoyed it. But where I said I thought I wanted to be an athletic director, I just realized that wasn't where I wanted to be anymore. And I still really loved my job, but I didn't love softball the way the softball coaches loved softball. I mean, they were devoting their entire careers to it. And so I remember sitting in my office and listening to them say, talk about college softball over and over and over. Talk about the plays, talk about the games, talk about the head coaches, where this next athlete was transferring, where our head coaching position was coming up, all of those things. And truly, I just couldn't care like they did. And I felt a little guilt about that. And around that time, I asked myself a very, very important question. I said, if you could talk about anything, like the softball coaches talk about softball, what would that be? Now, let me put a pause here and tell you that during that same time, I was also getting my master's at Arkansas, and I had written a paper on cognitive behavioral therapy. And I thought, this is really interesting for me. Around the same time, I also had hired a life coach for some personal things and started to develop some really strong mindset techniques. And so kind of that serendipitous moment led me to say, hey, I'm going to share with my life coach that I want to start coaching people because this is where I feel like I'm being called. So in this pivot, working in athletics, well, I really needed to pivot because I knew that I didn't want to be in softball and I knew long-term I didn't want to be in college athletics. That was one thing I knew for sure. And then how I started to make that pivot was I just told my life coach, hey, I want to do what you do. Can you teach me how? And she did. So that brings me to the third pivot. So the third pivot is I started to get some one-on-one clients. And I thought, how can I get more clients and work with more people? And I decided to start with where my feet are at. And that's one of my favorite pieces of advice. And so I looked around and I was like, I'm working at a university. There's 19 different sports programs. How can I cater to these athletes? Now, I couldn't work with softball athletes because that was a conflict of interest. But how do I work with these athletes and give them the mindset skills and tools that I wish I had when I was an athlete not too long ago? And so I decided to go to the Student Athlete Development Center and pitch myself and say, hey, I know you guys have this whole women's program, and whole was an acronym for things I can't remember now, but they supported female athletes. And so I said, can I speak to your female athletes? Can I host a whole women's event? And they ended up saying yes. And so a bunch of female athletes came out and I spoke to them on confidence. And from there, I got some one-on-one clients in various different sports. And that helped me build that muscle of coaching. And I got to learn, okay, athletes are all different. Where are you at on island A? How can I get you on island B? What is it that you're looking to create in your sport? Where do you want to go with it? And that's where I started. Now, the why for that pivot was that I knew I needed to niche down. I had some clients that were kind of all over the map, and I wasn't being very specific about who I was helping. So that's why I decided to pivot into elite mental training. And then the how was that I just approached the director of student athlete development. I knew that they hired outside people to come in and support our athletes in their growth. So why couldn't they hire my private business, right? And it worked. And so I was able to work with athletes in that way. Pivot number 4. So I think 2020 is probably a pivotal moment in most of our lives. There was such a change. And while I don't wish the COVID era on our country or our people ever again, it really did serve me and business well. So I was working full-time in business because I was working out of my 600 square foot apartment. The university had shut down, yet we were lucky enough to still get a paycheck. And so I had that backbone and I decided, okay, this is my opportunity. I'm going to see if I can do this full time. And so what I started to notice when I was looking around online, now I still had my elite mental training clients, that women were really interested in what I was doing. I was getting questions about what I'm posting on social media, specifically Instagram, how I'm building my brand. And I was just elated with the opportunities that I had learned. I had joined a mastermind with 40 other women, and I just saw this online space that I didn't even know existed. And so I decided to create my own mastermind. And I was helping women build their brands online so that they could sell on social media. And we were all looking for ways to transfer our gifts and our strengths and our skills into the online space because that was what was connecting us with COVID shutting everything down, brick and mortar. And so that was where that pivot came from. And I started doing more brand coaching. I moved away from the elite mental training and I got into business and brand coaching. So what is it that you like to do? How do we put that on social media so that we can gain your followers? And then how do you sell to them? So the thing that I started to notice though, towards the end of the year, we ended up carrying the mastermind from like March of 2020 until December, is that I couldn't support women further than that. I realized that there was some more support, and I ultimately decided that I needed to grow in my business more to be able to help these women grow. And a really exciting story came out of that. My now small bookkeeper left her full-time job. She was part of MMM. It was called the Motivated Mindset Mastermind, and she is now my bookkeeper. So that's a really cool story from back then. But for a lot of other women that needed additional tools, I didn't feel like I was the best coach to provide them at that time. So pivot number 4, why I was pivoting was I noticed in the market so many people wanting to be in the online space because of COVID. And then how did I do it? Well, I looked at the mastermind that I was in at the time, and I saw how it was structured. I saw the things I loved. I saw the things that I didn't love. And I decided to replicate that framework on Zoom, through a Facebook group, through a resource area inside of a platform called Kajabi. And that's how I served my clients. So that was pivot number 4. All right, pivot number 5 is what I've called the flailing era, because I was doing a lot of experimenting and figuring things out, and it just felt like I couldn't narrow down what I was doing, who I was selling to, what I was offering. And so honestly, that time frame spanned from about September 2022 to a couple months ago. So I'm bringing you guys real-time updates. Pivot number 5 during that time frame was I had left my job at the university. I'd gone full-time into business, and I had a lot of clients because I was almost panicking in a way. I went from two incomes to one, and I was like, okay, how do I generate recurring revenue? And at the time, I had these goals for $10,000 months. I had a goal for a six-figure year, and I wanted to really prove that to myself. And so I was saying yes to elite mental training clients. I had clients that I was helping them build their business from 0 to 6 figures all across the board. I had clients that I was serving in the leadership accelerator, where I was working with companies and helping their management and in the manager positions. And then I was also starting to add some Enneagram workshops. And so I was doing a lot of stuff, but there was times where it really felt like a chicken with my head cut off. And I ended up hiring a coach in the beginning of 2023, and she is phenomenal when it comes to messaging. And I knew that I had to narrow in and focus on one group. I knew that. And in the other side of things, I'm thinking, well, I also have to support myself and pay the bills. And so there wasn't a lot of long-term strategic decisions being made at that time, where I was trying to just make sure I was making money. And so I was serving all of these different people. So I even flew out to LA in fall of that year and knew that I had a framework. I was able to work with that coach and create my own framework. And she said to me, okay, what is the process that you take one-on-one clients through to get them results? And I built out a 6-step framework. At the time, I was calling it my Elevate framework. And I knew that's how I served one-on-one clients. But I was still on the fence of like, okay, am I working with business owners? Am I working with women in like leadership and performance? And this was really difficult. The thing that got me off the fence was what brings me to my next pivot. But in that flailing era, why I was in that space was that I just didn't feel fully confident to name who exactly my ideal client was. And I'm sure you hear that theme here. Niching down is hard. And so why I was in that space was I knew I didn't want to work with elite athletes anymore. That wasn't really where my passion was. And then I also knew that the word performance was a little bit misleading. Some people think theater, some people think athletics. And so I knew I wasn't quite hitting the nail on the head there. And then the how, the thing that got me off the fence was I joined a coaching program in the beginning of 2024. And to do that program, it was phenomenal, but you had to commit. There was no room for gray area. It was you're either moving forward as a business coach or you're moving forward in that performance area. And so I decided that I was going to get off the fence and I was going to be a business coach. And the reason why I wanted to do that was because I was really excited about a very specific result. If my clients could get clients and start making money doing what they love, what better result was that? And so I decided to jump off the fence and go fully into business. And I'm really getting you guys up to speed because this was in February of this year. All right, so pivot number 6, we're almost there. Thanks for hanging on this long. This was the business coaching space. And honestly, I was really pedal to the metal in this era because I was also getting ready for our wedding in August. So February to August was like a sprint to generate a ton of income and get ready for the wedding. And so I dove into this program. I was fully committed. I had paid a substantial amount of money and I went all in, and I created Elevate to Entrepreneurship, which was my 8-week live coaching program designed to give people a blueprint to enter entrepreneurship online. Now, the program is phenomenal. I stand by that. And I did a beta test where I had clients go through it, get amazing results, and then I ended up making my money back that I invested in the program to create it, and then some. So that was really great, but it plateaued. You guys, when I first started my entrepreneurial journey, I had very few examples of women in leadership positions. And sometimes when I shared what I was building with my friends or with my coworkers at the time, they just didn't really get it. Even when I wanted to create some new goals and talk about those ambitions, I didn't feel like I had a community of women to share that with, which is why I found an online community of other multi-passionate, like-minded women. If you can relate, join us in our Rise Facebook community, where you get free weekly coaching, a network of amazing women who are also in the arena, and you're the first to know about the latest offers. Women leaders rise together. See you inside our Rise Facebook community. You can find the link in the show notes. What I started to notice over the launch of that was that my audience just was not responding to business coaching whatsoever. On Facebook, on Instagram, and whenever I would share anything about branding or performance or leadership, that got the most engagement. And so I tried to ignore that at first. I'm not gonna lie. I was so stubborn and I was like, I really want to make this work. I just invested all this time and money, but that is not where my audience seemingly wanted to be. Now, did I want to be there? Yes. And I was still trying to make that work. And so what I had noticed is that I didn't have enough information about where people were when they started their entrepreneurial journey. When I created the program, I thought it was going to be for people who were getting into business. The people that ended up joining the program were people who already had businesses but wanted to sharpen up the online piece. Well, I decided to take a step back. And after the wedding, I started interviewing on Zoom 30 different entrepreneurs. And I really just took the time to ask them, like, what's the most challenging thing for you? I asked them where they want to go and what they were focused on as far as business development now. And then the third question I asked was, if I could wave a magic wand and give you whatever you want, what would it be? And those three questions were really valuable because, one, it helped them understand where they were at, but two, I got a really good idea of where they were at. And honestly, it was through taking action on those 30 interviews that I realized that business coaching is very complex for two reasons. Number one, there's some serious toxicity there in the online space, and there's a lack of distrust just because back in like 2016, 17, 18, 19, 20, it was very high ticket item for a vague return. It was like, join this program, it'll change your life. And then there wasn't really a promise on the result. And I think a lot of people really got burned by that. So consumer behavior was that they were just not trusting the market as much. And then I noticed that through those interviews, I was hearing that I don't know that my audience saw me as a business coach more so than they knew me as an athlete and performance and all of those things. And I think that came up in a lot of those conversations. And so there was these little nudges that was like, okay, is the business coaching space where you truly need to be? Do you feel fully confident in this space? And some of the clients I was working with, I found that they needed specialization. And I was delivering more of a broad general program that was very great for giving you the strategy, giving you the blueprint. Once you have it, you know how to get your clients. The execution of that for a lot of my clients was very hard. So some just felt very terrified of the sales process. And I understand it can be really scary. And so a lot of those clients really needed some intensive sales training. A lot of clients needed marketing training. Some were really great at marketing, but some needed marketing training. And so I noticed that one, my market didn't really see me as a business coach if I was calling a spade and looking at the algorithm and looking at the metrics on social media. And then two, there was a need for really specific specializations, whereas I was giving a blueprint. I was giving more of a general overview and specific strategy. It is a valuable program. However, there were some spots where if I could go back and add like specializations in all of those areas, fantastic. I didn't want to take the time to do that after a while. It didn't seem valuable to my time after a while if I wasn't going to stick in that online coaching space. So pivot number 6, why I got to that spot and decided I needed to make a move is that my audience didn't see me as a business coach ultimately. How I decided to make a move. So this brings me to the next and final pivot. I decided to start engaging in conversations with people that had been in business and knew entrepreneurship. So I got on a phone call with 2 different times with Startup Junkie, which is a local nonprofit. And I started asking questions and started sharing what I do and kind of let them do an objective look at my business. And I kept hearing that they really thought I would be valuable to women in the corporate space. And this is something that I had considered before because we live in an area where there's Walmart, there's JB Hunt, we're in Fayetteville, Arkansas, there's Tyson, there's Kraft Heinz, there's a lot of these organizations. And specifically, women 25 to 40 might be underserved as far as leadership goes, or they'd get a performance review. And what do we do with them now? How do we groom them for that next position? So I started learning about all of that. That was my how. I met with entrepreneurs who knew the market and the demand and the gap around here. And then I started meeting with a gentleman who owned a company called Insights. It is an executive coaching company. And he asked me to be a part of the team. And so this brings me to pivot number 7. This is the final pivot. I knew I wanted to focus on women 25 to 40 in the corporate space, in agencies. This brings me to my final pivot, which honestly is real life, up to date right now. And so I'm going through this right now as an executive performance and branding coach. Now, if you're here still in this conversation, you might be thinking, this sounds exhausting, Paige. I don't want to reinvent the wheel that many times. And I just want to tell you, it's not reinventing the wheel. I don't feel like I've started from ground zero in any of those spots, except for when I was first getting into business, right? But everything was transferable and everything was stacking on top of one another. So every move I made, I just took some of those skills that I was paying attention to into my next move. And I kept paying attention. And I'm going to share 3 takeaways with you if you're at a pivotal spot in your career. But finalizing the pivot number 7, where I'm at now as an executive performance and branding coach, is I started paying really close attention to what my audience wanted from me. And a lot of it was along that space. And the tools that I was taking had already gotten fantastic client results for 5 years in various different areas. So now, how was I going to package that and sell it to a different group and get results for a different group? It's just the marketing that changes, the group that I'm targeting that changes, none of the rest changes. So I didn't fully understand the world, and I'm still learning their world as far as what the acronyms mean, how it works in their space, what the pain points are, what the challenges are. And so I'm not going to pretend to be an expert in that world. I'm an expert at getting you results. And so I have been getting in the room with leaders in those organizations through Insights, which is the company that I joined. It's an executive coaching program. So that company does big corporate sponsorship or big corporate packages, whereas I'm working specifically with those women 25 to 40 in one-on-one settings. And so both Insights and PRC are fantastic because they're directly aligned with one another, yet not competitors because they serve different groups. And so I'm learning through listening and getting coffee and asking for interview questions and feedback. I'm learning about the pain points, challenges, and desires so that I can add that into my marketing and start shifting the ideal client in that direction. So thank you so much for being here for all of these pivots. I hope that you can find yourself in a specific position in one of my stories so that you feel moved to take action instead of being stuck. So if you're in one of those positions, I have 3 specific takeaways for you. And you may be feeling like you're stuck with a certain boss, you're stuck at a certain job, you're stuck with a certain company. And I want to remind you, you're not stuck. And these 3 takeaways are going to help you pivot in the direction that you're meant to go in. So takeaway number 1, continue to evaluate and reevaluate your energy. So what projects fire you up and leave you excited? What projects drain your energy? What do people around you say about you or ask for your help with? Are you creative? Do you have a really good way of bringing multiple people together? Are you a sounding board? What are those things that you're really good at? I want you to really pay attention to those because that is your magic. And shout out to my friend Cassie. She introduced me to the concept of magic and mechanics. These first 2 takeaways are magic. The third takeaway is mechanics. So magic is all about you and what you do and what you bring to the table and your gifts and strengths. So number 2 takeaway is keep refining your vision. This is so important. Where do you want to go? Where do you think you want to be? Back when I was in leasing and getting into college athletics, I thought maybe I want to be an athletic director. That didn't necessarily end up being the case, but it moved me in that direction, which ultimately got me closer to what I'm doing now. And so it's really important that you have that vision in front of you and you revisit it and revise it as much as possible. So these first 2 takeaways: continue to reevaluate and evaluate your energy, and then stay connected to your vision. Those 2 are your magic, because you are the motor. The vehicle is your life. You're driving it, right? And the magic comes from within. And then that drives the mechanics, which takes me to takeaway number 3. Number 3 is take action. Do something, for God's sake. This is what I mean by that. This is the mechanics. I'm telling you, you've got to move. When I was flailing in that 2-year period that I was telling you about, I was still moving. I was still able to generate revenue. I was still able to help us fund our wedding. I was still able to serve my clients. And that's because I just kept moving. I kept experimenting. I kept paying attention. And I invite you to do the same. If your only action is to tell people what you want, that is going to open so many more doors for you than you even know are available. So thank you so much for being here. If you loved this episode, I'd really love if you left a review. It means more than anything. I can keep sharing parts of this journey with you. And if you tag me on Instagram, we'll be able to interact. Thank you so much for being here, and I hope you have the best day. I hope today's episode inspired you on your journey in the arena. Make sure to check out the show notes in the description for a rundown of today's show with all the important links. If you enjoyed this, please share with a friend. I know how much it means to me when my friends share podcasts. Leave us a review and let us know what landed with you over on Instagram at Paige_Rene15. As always, your best bet is on yourself.